Like, you know, before I got into non-duality, I did like 5 years of meditation practice, and it really helped my personality. It helped me deal with a lot of things. It was really beneficial on the human level. It got me used to spending time not doing things. Like, I'd been programmed, like most of us, to do things all the time, and it got me used to not doing things all the time, to being able to sit, and then that subsequently helped me to enjoy things a lot more. Like, when you get used to spending time alone, you're not so driven by fear of not having anything to do, or something not living up to your expectations, or having to take a car journey for a long time, or a train journey. Like, you stop seeing time as an activity, and you become more relaxed with everything. And yeah, it was just so beneficial to me on the human level. And I don't think that before I started doing that meditation, I'd have been able to hear non-duality. And what I notice with people that are into non-duality, and because it's also accessible on the internet, you know, when I started spiritually seeking, things weren't accessible. It was really difficult finding all these things. Like, it was like often like hearing about it from other people. And there used to be like a spiritual bookstore that I used to go to. So before I even got into non-duality, although I'd heard of Eckhart Tolle and those sorts of teachers, but before I really got into non-duality, I did 5 years of meditating, and that was like 1 to 2 hours of meditation per day, and then retreats where I could do up to 10 hours of meditation per day. Like, I really got used to my body, and the meditation that I learned was bodily sensation. So I really learned about my body and what my body was feeling. I often notice that people I'm working with in one-to-one sessions, they don't know what they're feeling. They think they know what they're feeling. So they have a story telling themselves what they're feeling, which is often very different from what they're feeling. So they have a story telling themselves about something, but actually what their body's saying and wanting is something completely different. And that's really hard for me to point out to people when I'm in sessions with them. And I do point it out, but often people don't want to go there. They're addicted to the storyteller, and they're addicted to what they think. So they don't want to really listen to what their body feels. Often if you listen to what your body feels, then it might not support a lot of your life. Like, you might realize that your body and your life are out of sync. And I just found it so valuable, those years of meditation and understanding my body. So when I went into non-duality, I was very comfortable of sitting with disturbing feelings and knowing that they would pass, and being happy with being bored or upset. Not happy, but just there was an acceptance of it. Like 10 hours of meditation a day for a 10-day retreat, you know, you become really used to the sensations in your body, and you're not on this cycle to try to get out of them. So when I heard non-duality, even though I was using non-duality to escape what I'm feeling, because we're always using every thought process to escape what we're feeling when we're identified. It's always about escaping feelings. Well, not all the time, but a lot of the time. Even though I was using non-duality to escape feelings, I also wasn't. So when somebody pointed out to me, you know, like, so say if I was upset and I was telling a story of it, and somebody pointed out to me, what's the feeling in your body though, I could quite easily drop down to that feeling and see what my body was feeling and understand what my body was saying and my body was wanting. When I work with people, I realize that a lot of the time they can't. They struggle to identify where feelings are in the body, they struggle to identify what the feelings are, and they struggle to identify what the body wants. And this is all in the process of becoming a balanced human being. And I feel now, after speaking for such a long time, that there really has to be a certain level of balance on the human level. Otherwise, non-duality will just be about seeking to get away from being human, and it becomes like this intellectual game that somebody's using to try to escape themselves. And to me, non-duality is a sinking into being absolutely human. And when you become absolutely human, you also become non-human, because when you really drop into everything, you drop into the sensation right now, time and you disappear. There is simply what's happening. But that's an absolute dropping into the sensations, not living in your mind, trying to run away from the sensations, trying to be something else than what you are. It's a surrender to what's happening, and you become human and non-human. On one level, you become so radically human, and on another level, there's this infinite emptiness that is everything, that's love, that's been forgotten and overlooked as the person's been seeking. And so for the last couple of years, I've been harping on a lot more about feelings, and the reason that I harp on so much about feelings is because that's what's actually happening. Your intellectual interpretation of non-duality, that there is nobody and that there is nothing, that's intellectual. What's actually happening now is thoughts. So that's part of the sensation of what's happening. But there's also bum on seat, there's emotional feelings, there's sound, and it's an absolute surrender to what's happening. It's not some intellectual thing where you get non-duality in the intellect. Part of the process is understanding non-duality, and that helps relax the mind. But it's also sinking back into what you're feeling and what's happening. When you're afraid of what you're feeling and when you're trying to avoid what you're feeling, you just live in your head, in stories. And you're always afraid of feeling something. You're always afraid of feeling fear or afraid of feeling sadness, and you're not even aware of it, but you're setting up your life so you never experience these things. And as you set up your life trying to avoid negativity, you actually begin to become dead, and then you stop experiencing joy and happiness and freedom, because you can't cut off one without the other. By cutting off the negative, all the dark stuff, you're cutting off all the light stuff as well. And freedom is actually a sinking back into all of it, all of the human experience. And then actually the human experience becomes a lot more simple. So when there's sadness, there's sadness. When there's joy, there's joy. And you're not stuck in this mental acrobats trying to get out of sadness and trying to stay in joy, which you're most probably not even conscious that you're doing. It's something, it's like an energy in the body that's always trying to stay in positivity, and the positivity is found in time. But until the human, on the human level, becomes more aware of the body, everything that I say to you is just intellectual, because if you sink into the body, this just becomes obvious. This no longer becomes a teaching of me teaching you. It becomes obvious of the way that you're functioning. Like the answers are all in you. You don't even really need a teacher. But in one way you do, because otherwise you'll keep going into your mind. The mind is so addictive to remind you to go into the body. But in one way you don't need a teacher, because the answers are all there. If there could be a surrender back into the body, a surrender back into what's happening, because sensation is what's happening, feelings are what's happening. You know, there is no body, there's nobody there, this is a reality of oneness. Those are thoughts, and yeah, the thoughts are here, but they're only one part of experiencing, tiny part of experiencing. And I remember when I used to sit in silence years ago when I first started doing talks, people would be like, what's she doing? Why is she sitting there like that? And like complaining about me sitting in silence. And I went through a stage of never saying anything directly to do, because who would do it? Especially when I first started teaching, because you have these awakenings and it's so clear there's nobody here to do anything and there's nobody to give prescription to. But then over time, I realized that if you don't say anything and if you don't address these problems, then people make up stories about it. So they make up the story that freedom has got nothing to do with meditating or sitting quietly or investigating the person, because there is no body. And that's somebody's interpretation of what I used to say, or the way I used to speak, or the way that more Neo-Advaita teachers speak. And that's not actually what they're saying. They don't actually say don't meditate, but that's what the person in the mind interprets, because they don't understand that they're not actually saying that. They're talking about something that's radically free here, that's got nothing to do with what you did in the past or did in the future. But that's an example of how a very active mind totally misinterprets of the subtleties of what's being said, and then makes up its own story, and then lives in this story of you don't need to meditate, there's nothing to be done. I've never heard a non-duality, Neo-Advaita non-duality teacher say there's nothing to be done. What they say is there is nobody. And then the person interprets that as there's nothing to be done. Meditating happens. And that's the truth of things. Meditating does happen. For no one. And so that's why when you first start speaking, normally you don't want to give this prescription, even though it's not prescription, it's description, but you don't want to say meditate or do this or do that, because there is nobody to meditate. But if you don't say it, then people assume that you're saying don't meditate, which isn't true either. It's a really difficult thing to talk about, non-duality. It's like a delicate dance. And I feel like it's way more important to look at the experience rather than to talk really intellectually about non-duality. So often when I do sessions with people, I focus on more what their experience is. People don't often like this. They want me to do a session with them where I give them the high of wholeness, because I can also do that. You most probably experience it when I'm speaking about non-duality. It can give you this high and this freedom because you're resonating with what I say, which is beautiful. But when I do a session with someone, often what I like to do is point them back into their experience. And because they've been seeking for so many years to escape what's happening, when I point them back into actually what their experience is, it's uncomfortable. So then they often interpret that the session didn't work or was bad because I was uncomfortable or I noticed discomfort. And they think that the session is about getting a lollipop, because that's what everything else is in life. You work hard, you get a lollipop, you get a goodie. And often that's why people don't like meditation, because when they start meditating, it's uncomfortable and they're like, where's my lollipop? I wanted to feel calm and good at the end of it. But often that's not the case. Often the mind in the beginning feels agitated, because it's so used to seeking for the next thing, for the next thing, for the next thing. When can I get the next lollipop? When can I get the next pleasure? And what I used to love about Neo-Advaita teachers when I used to go and see them is, one thing you'll notice they'll do is they very cleverly shut you up and make you sit there. If you go to their talks, they corner the mind, they stop the mind, and then they make you sit there. Like you get to the point where you can't think of any more questions, so therefore because there's a session going on, like it's a 2-hour session, there's no more questions you could possibly ask, because they've put all the barriers up. Nope, there is nobody. So then there is a forcing into natural meditation, but the person isn't aware of that. And I used to just love that, watching them do that. Of course, Neo-Advaita teachers would totally like me now because I give advice or I say things. But all teachers are like that. It's very human. No, this is the only way. This is the right way. I like to really appreciate each unique individual expression of it. And see that it's not about one being right or this one being right or that one being right, that they all have qualities in which are true. And like everything, they always have qualities that are not so true. Ones that are beneficial and not so beneficial.